This is Profit Talks, a podcast produced by Hayek Global College and dedicated to exploring how you can ethically maximize profits. For more episodes, please visit hayekcollege.com/profit. Hello, my guest today is Elizabeth Evans. How are you, Elizabeth? It's a pleasure to have you here.
Great, thank you. It's good to be here.
Elizabeth Evans is a sales compensation senior manager working for a Fortune 500 company with over 30 years of experience broadly on compensation management and over 10 years specifically on sales compensation. And it's interesting to me, Elizabeth, as I already told you, that the sales compensation as a specialist, as a specific specialty in HR, in human resource department, is not as common here in Brazil as I believe is in the US. And would you be able to just give us a picture of how does it fit in the big picture of the human resource department?
Human resources is a massive umbrella in the United States. It can cover recruiting. It can cover benefits. It can cover training and development, compensation management, executive compensation, etc. It is usually the expression of how a company wants to manage their employees, and in a larger company, there's usually a very well-defined organization under the human resources umbrella for each of those elements that I mentioned. Sales compensation general compensation, which you normally would think about in terms of writing position descriptions, setting salary ranges, doing salary surveys, that kind of thing, running a merit program. That's a very common project for a compensation manager. That's generally the expression of how the company feels about how competitive they want to be in the marketplace. Okay, they do that by maybe actually stating a compensation philosophy. For example, you could work for an organization that says we want to lead the marketplace. They will do all the salary surveys, they'll participate in everything, they'll collect the data, and they will say our salary ranges are going to be 10% higher than the competitors because they want to lead the marketplace. Or they might do it by default. Okay, but one way or another, you're going to have a group doing that in a larger company. It's a fairly rigorous field. It's something you can get certified in, certainly, through our governing agency, World at Work. And then they can, and so this is how the company says, this is how we want to pay people. And I always used to say when I was running base compensation programs, we want to pay people enough so that they don't want to leave, not so much that we're impoverishing the company. And we want to make sure that it's competitive, and we want to make sure that the employee understands why they're being paid the way they are. So
is it more common to have an outside consultant to do this type of research and suggestions of compensation, or rather have the inside HR do the job?
In my experience, a smaller organization can really benefit from a consultant. And in fact, that was a big part of my career. I guess I've spent about a third of it being a consultant. And generally what you find is a smaller organization, they have what we would call an HR generalist, the person who does a little bit of everything. And they don't have the time to do the analysis required. Generally, people who gravitate towards being an HR generalist, they don't think of themselves as math people too. They're more people, and they're less of an analyst. And so they don't have enough of a company where you need to have someone on staff all the time. And so that was actually the bread and butter of my consulting business, was working for HR generalists who said, I really need position descriptions written for everyone in the company, but that's a one-time thing. I'll maintain them after we get them all written. And so they would bring me in, or they would have me come in and do salary surveys for them and analyze the results. A larger company, they have that all the time. There's usually at least one or two, three larger companies. They have an entire, 50-person department doing exactly that for the company. So
That's something interesting you said, where some HR people don't have the math skills. When I think about HR, the HR person, we usually think about the person which is very good with interpersonal relationships, who can talk to people, and who are the more people person than the quantitative person. But it also seems to me that nowadays, with data analysis and IT systems and everything, it seems that it's more and more important for the quantitative skills in many specialties, and as you mentioned, in HR. But have you seen a trend that math skills are more important today than they used to be back in the day?
I'm not sure that I've noticed that, simply because it's always been central to what I do. So I wouldn't have noticed a shift.
Uh-huh.
But I think your observation is really accurate. Two things. One is that in all of those HR disciplines, and I forgot to mention another big one, is HRIS, Human Resources Information Systems. They're usually the people who run your PeopleSoft or your Workday, or all that information. They keep your records for you. When I was recruiting, and I was recruiting HR people, another part of my career, you had to find people to recruit. You had to find candidates, and HR generalists always are having parties, at least in the US. They're always socializing. There's something once a month, and they're within their group, their professional organization. Compensation analysts very rarely have a gathering. The World at Work organization love them to death, but they don't host parties the way the Society for Human Resources Management does, the generalist group. And then HRIS people don't congregate at all. I mean, ever. I can't even find a governing agency for them, or at least I couldn't 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And so the running joke for me was always that about compensation analysts, or analysts in general, is how to spot the extroverted analyst, right? She's the one looking at your shoes while she's talking to you. And it still holds true. The generalists I work with are lovely people, and they are so skilled at handling situations that are tricky and touchy and challenging. And I just provide data for them to use, and I explain it to them. And they shouldn't be bothering their heads with, how did I come up with that data? They should have faith in me that I am producing the information they need.
And just of curiosity, I'm an economist, and I was brought up with the whole economic way of thinking, and I never thought of I never gave much thought to the compensation part of the HR. How much do you use economics in your analysis? Do you use it at all?
You want to think about it in terms of, well, there's supply and demand. Of course, you have to be aware of that, but that's a general knowledge. Then there's also just the whole issue of what's happening in the economy right now. It's very difficult to move off an average merit increase, for example, of 3%. It seems like it's been, when World at Work has done this survey every year, it's the average merit increase budget has been 3% for forever. But when I broke into working, when I got out of college, the average was something like 10%. I mean, that's real money. And so obviously the economic situation has contributed to that in a variety of ways. Also, too, realizing that people respond very well to variable incentives has taken a lot of the pressure off of salary. So you're more likely to find a 3% merit budget, but then there's also a short-term incentive offered to a wider variety of your employees. It's not just for the, directors or executives. You'll find it going deeper into an organization. An example from healthcare from years and years ago, working, my first compensation analysis experience came from working in healthcare. And there was a time when physical therapists were impossible to find. You could not find them. In fact, our entire salary range management for that group was here's the rest of it for the organization, and then physical therapists is like whatever it took to get them because they were impossible. Then you realize that people started gravitating towards that field because they realized there was astronomical money to be made relatively. And so then there reached a point still in probably, about the first 10 years of my career. So in that span, the market got glutted. And then I saw organizations taking the almost unprecedented step of actually reducing the salary ranges for a physical therapist because there was a glut. I'm not in tune anymore with what's happened to that particular field, but that's how you can see the sweep of economic activity changing things.
Yeah, you at some point you have to react to the economic forces that are happening that is not in our control, and then you have to adapt to that. That's cool. And this leads in also to another question where incentives are really important. We know that, but we often see, I don't know how much this is in the United States, but in Brazil, it's very widespread that companies use a lot of fixed salaries for many things, and it's actually not. It's more common to see companies using fixed salaries. I'm talking about the small business, right? The people that are not in the corporate world with within the bigger companies. And why would you want to recommend using a variable salary, like having commissions and bonuses instead of just a fixed salary?
Well, all my experience has been U.S., right? And you probably are aware more than anyone that there's a big cultural thing to be aware of as well. What works in the U.S. may not work well in Brazil because it's really a different group of people with an entirely different set of backgrounds, etc. But you might be familiar with somebody named Frederick Hertzberg, who
I'm not.
Oh, okay. He's always fascinated me. He was like the one thing I remembered from college that I really got to use, and that was that he said that employee satisfaction's got two dimensions. There's a hygiene factor and a motivation factor, and salary is a hygiene factor. You're never going to motivate someone with a salary. Essentially, the concept is that you need a baseline of salary and benefits, and the employees expect these things. And if it's not there, if the salary isn't reasonably competitive, if the benefits aren't reasonably sufficient, that it can only be a dissatisfier, but will never motivate somebody to do better for you. To say, oh, I better bring my A game here. If you want motivation, it's things like recognition, achievement. These are the things that make your employees more productive and committed.
Another way to put it is extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation, right? Some authors have put it like that, where the extrinsic motivation is the motivation of salary, and intrinsic motivation is the motivation where you feel that you are a part of the organization or the leadership you're following.
Except salary is never going to motivate you to go higher. It is only going to keep you in your spot. If salary isn't there, if you determine that your salary is not competitive, for example, then you might quit and go somewhere else. But if someone giving you a raise is going to keep you happy and pumped up for a very short period of time.
I see.
Just to raise your base pay. It just becomes part of the background.
I see.
And so things like your manager commenting on how valued you are, that's off the charts in terms of motivation, is what Hertzberg was saying. And I think that that's true. And that's why a fixed salary is not going to be something to be enough to pivot a salesperson's head, for example, to do something strenuous, get a new product off the ground for you, that kind of thing. Take the personal risk required to be a salesperson You have to be willing to endure the no, and you have to be brave to be a salesperson, or at least oblivious.
Yeah,
And,
it's not easy. So.
no, not at all. And so a background, a hygiene item like salary isn't going to do it. So.
But what? So if a salary doesn't do it, why does it make the difference to give a commission instead of just a fixed salary?
Well, because it's immediate. It's or at least is sooner. A fixed salary, you might get a raise once a year, right? But a commission is frequently paid on a monthly basis. I think that's the most common. It would be on a monthly basis, and so that's like an immediate reaction to something you did, and it's immediately traceable to something you did. Think about a performance appraisal you've gotten where they talk about, well, Edson is committed, and he has, he produces accurate work, things like that. That's very subjective. This is not subjective. This is objective. I sold a thing and then I got this money for selling the thing. It's directly relatable.
So
and you really have to be a special person to be a salesperson. It's
a form of giving already an immediate feedback of recognition to the person, so to make them feel better about the results that they have created.
And make them want to do it some more. Yes.
It's less about how much money you got, but more about how well you feel about being recognized by your company, would you say?
I think it's a mistake to think of salespeople as only driven by money. I think it kind of devalues everything they can bring to the table. I would never suggest that a salesperson is immune to wanting to know that they are valued and that they're participating. I think that a salesperson is going to be more competitive than most. And that's why you see things like president's clubs and things like that, where they say, here, this is the best salesperson in the company. But you'll frequently find it's not the person who's the highest paid. Okay, a president's club generally takes into several factors at least, and how much commission or incentive you earn is not the biggest thing. Frequently, it's a high earner because they're usually a high producer, but it's also people who take care of their customers well. They're team players. They're that kind of thing. But salespeople frequently are more competitive than most. They like seeing their name up high. You can do a lot with sharing that information internally with them.
See, I had an experience creating an incentive bonus for the team that I worked with at the university and I worked for. And what we did is we didn't have a commission. We had a specific bonus where if you reach this goal, you were going to receive this much bonus. And then we had several scaled goals. And what we did is I didn't have a compensation specialist help me out. What I intuitively did is, well, I don't want to give an individual bonus for each person. I could have measured their performance individually. What I rather did is I'm gonna give it a team bonus. We had like around 10 people, and the idea was I felt they had a good team spirit, and I didn't want for them to be competing for the customers. But I don't know if I did the right thing. Do you think?
Well, what was it that you wanted them to do? What was the metric, as we would call it? What was the goal you wanted them to achieve?
So we had a list of students that were interested in the university, and they had to call up these students and go through the admissions process and have them in and show the university, and it's basically sell the courses.
Oh, okay. I don't think it was a bad thing. In general, the conventional wisdom is avoid team bonuses unless it is something that requires teamwork to accomplish. For example, if you've got several people down the chain of the sale that need to be involved, like a sales engineer, you have people who have to participate in the sale and they all have to do a part to make the sale. In your example, it might be you've got the person who makes the initial call and elicits the interest and gets the potential student to sign up for a campus visit.
Okay.
Okay. And then somebody receives that person at the campus and takes them around on a tour.
Okay.
And then there's a
So
third
different
person.
steps.
Right. Then there's a third person who has to talk about maybe the finances involved with going, someone in admissions or something, or financial aid, who's going to help put together a package.
Uh-huh.
And I have no idea what you were trying to accomplish or if you had these steps. But if you did, then that's a team goal, because if one person messes that up, if one person's rude, one person doesn't show up for their step, then it falls apart and you lose your customer. There's a good place where you could use a team goal.
I see. But I should
So,
also have individual goals for each part of this process?
a true salesperson is very much interested in seeing goals that are they control them themselves. So the
Yes.
person, so these hypothetical 3 people who are helping you with your sales, instead of having team goal, and in the example I just cited, I think a team goal is important. It could be very important, but you could take the 3 different roles and say, okay, well, you're making phone calls, so I want to see that it's got to be something you can measure objectively. You don't ever want a subjective goal where somebody's going, yeah. No, you want it to be something that, yeah, I made 100 calls. You wanted me to call 100 people, and I made 100 calls.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that kind of a goal. The downside to that is that you don't want people just like dialing anyone to get 100 calls.
Yeah.
You want, right. So what you do is you got 50% acceptance on, yeah, I'll come in for a campus visit. That might be a goal you would give the person making the phone calls. On the campus, person who's doing the campus visit, you get 50% acceptance on people saying, yeah, I'll go over to financial aid and talk to them. Point me in that direction. And only 50% say, yeah, I want to go home now. Okay. And then the admissions people, that would be your trickiest one in the US. You'd probably go to jail or something if you paid them on how many people signed up. You don't want to do that because then they might do something bad. You might have introduced a moral hazard where your admissions people are like, yeah, I'll promise them anything, so they'll sign.
Yeah.
Okay. So and everybody in this hypothetical chain, should be careful about that. But your admissions people, what you would do is you would maybe grade them on accuracy of information presented, anything but how many people signed up as a result. So that actually is a pretty good example. It covers many of the different things you have to think about. It has to be strictly measurable, objective, and ideally something that the rep can observe and see how they're doing. Yeah,
Who's the rep?
50. Oh,
The
in this case,
supervisor?
any rep is anyone. No, when I say rep, I mean any one of these 3 roles. Any of these people doing this job that you want to give them an incentive for, that's a person I would call a rep and a sales rep.
Okay.
And sorry, I was using my own shorthand.
No worries. It's good that we can learn what the jargons are.
Yeah.
But so let's go to this example. The first person doing the phone call, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's doing the phone call to 100 different people, and say there are some people who are more likely to convert and to actually become students in the end of the day to enroll within these 100 than others are. Wouldn't we want also that his goal would be to convert the final student instead of just bringing those people to visit the campus?
Yeah, you're the person who gives them the power in their role. You're the one who defines their role and says, these are the things we want you to accomplish. You want people to show up for a campus visit. You want, they don't have a lot of control about whether, in this hypothetical example, they're not the ones who can really influence that tour. And so if you said in this hypothetical example that the person making the phone call, the outbound call to call Burke and asking Burke to, come for a campus visit, if you make their results dependent on the person giving the tour at all, then they could say, well, Elizabeth gave a lousy tour and now I'm out money. Elizabeth, you've got a horrible person making the campus tour here. she's mean, she's rude, she doesn't speak clearly, she talks too much. And how can I make any money if that's the case? And so the danger of a team goal, or a danger of the team goal, is that so the guy making the outbound call gets the person to come for the visit, but understands that the campus tour guide was horrible. And now they're finding that person themselves and going, you're costing me money. And there goes your team spirit, because, you're messing with me, man. And then you have problems. So that's why a team goal might be a challenge there. A manager who is not confident might want that. They don't want to be the one saying, like, you're really giving lousy tours. They're short, you're not checking all the boxes or whatever. That's hard to give feedback like that. And so they want the compensation plan, to do it for them.
Before we continue this podcast, let's run a quick ad on Hayek Global MBA. Let me give you a good news. During the past century, on average, import tariffs have fallen drastically all over the world, making it ever more globalized. Commerce has risen, walls have fallen, and nations have become more connected as people enjoy higher living standards. It also means there's a lot of opportunities for those who can connect businesses, people, and cultures from different countries. How do you prepare yourself for this new world? One easy answer is, take some time off and go get an international MBA at an Ivy League university. But we know this is easier said than done, as you may have several constraints such as your family, a job, and it also costs a lot of money. What if you had an option of taking a part-time global MBA course officially accredited by the Ministry of Education in Brazil, which is 1. Truly international, with top-notch professors and students coming from all over the world. 2. Practical, with a curriculum focused on developing the skills and competencies that will most closely match what you will need in the job market. And 3. For a purpose, where you will discover how to create the most value and improve people's lives through the practice of business with transparency and integrity, while also maximizing your profits. Welcome to Hayek Global MBA, a 1-year online program designed to equip you with the tools to make a real difference in your company, lead world-class teams, and ultimately contribute to a freer, more prosperous, and peaceful world. Let's talk. Please visit hayekcollege.com/MBA.
And what about there are certain aspects of the sales process that is not there are routines that should be done in the sales process, but they're not the short-term results. So I'll give another example here. If you're selling a car, like, and then you're someone calls there's a salesperson doing outbound calls, and then he calls someone. Oh, do you wanna buy this car? I'm selling you this car. I said, no, I don't want to buy this car right now, but I do want to buy it a year from now. And then the person says, well, 1 year from now, I'm not even going to be here, so I shouldn't bother about this person. So the sales rep doesn't put the information on the CRM system that way this person wanted to buy a car next year. So the company might lose a sale because that person didn't put the information in the system, right?
Common problem.
So how do you deal with that type of problem?
That is something that a sales manager has to take care of. The sales rep who is or is not using the CRM correctly needs to be coached and counseled on that. And so if you're using something like Salesforce.com, you can keep track of it. And it requires, again, a confident manager who can sit down and say, you're not using this correctly. You are not adding to our database and it's not just something like the example you cited. It's like, okay, I sell cars, you sell trucks for the same company.
Yeah.
All right. And so I get the phone call and I say, well, I can sell you a car. And they go, no, I really want a truck. And I don't enter it in,
And
this guy wants a truck so you can pick it up.
Because the truck is from another sales rep and not you, so you don't have incentive to
Right.
sell that truck.
Why should I care? So,
Yeah.
but the problem is that if the person calling and wanting the car or wanting the truck might want a car later. And so if you blow them off now, you might be costing yourself a sale. And that's what your confident manager needs to say, this is why you should care about it. Because the saying in the States is, everybody's tuned into what's in it for me, WIFI or something. And it's what's in it for me. And there's a reason why you should care, even if it does not seem immediately obvious. And that is you will get teamwork back if you send it out. And you will get the car sale 2 years from now when that person, you've now entangled yourself with that customer and they're going to remember you as being helpful and they'll come and find you when they want a car. And that's why you do it. It's also why you want to give some kind of a base salary to a salesperson, because that's how you pay for that kind of activity. It's impossible to put a dollar value, every time you log into the CRM, we'll give you a quarter, or I should say 25 cents. That's not practical. And then of course you get into I'll just sit here and log in and not do anything while I'm here.
Exactly.
But yeah, so that's why you want a base salary, so then you can require things, treating customers well, even if they're not immediately your customer, being a team player. That's why you do it. And that's how you can require it, if you pay a reasonable base salary.
Would you say that a good practice would be, and I'm just making stuff up here, okay? What if I pay the person 80% for your performance for selling cars, and then I can pay you 20% of an extra bonus for if the team of truck sellers and car sellers met their goals? Would that be something desirable or no?
In general, and it's fascinating that you bring that up, because I was just recently able to listen to somebody who's considered an expert in the field, and I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but the Alexander Group is an American consulting firm who employ some of the leading lights in sales compensation administration and management, and their recommendation was, don't do team goals too much in general. I kind of like it because, again, it would incentivize me, the car salesman, to flip that truck customer over correctly and well. The downside is that if there's too much that's out of a rep's control in that goal, then they're not going to like it. It won't be motivational, and it could produce that bad behavior I talked about before, where now they're going, hey, you're not pulling your weight, dude, and then your team spirit is completely shot.
Because then you have one person that's not selling at all, and he's still going to get the bonus, even though.
Yes. So what you want to do is you make your managers responsible for that one.
I see.
And then that should percolate down. They are, promoting the good behavior that will produce the outcome you want, but it's not on the sales reps themselves. It's on the managers.
So the managers are going to be the ones responsible for leading the whole team and making the whole team spirit happen, which is going to be his job. Which then goes back to what we were saying. It's all about having I forgot the word, non-hygienic.
Motivational or hygiene. Another way he put it, the way I learned it, actually, I didn't hear it as a hygiene factor, but this is back in the Stone Age. It was maintenance and motivation.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
There's a lot of power to that.
Yes.
And what's your advice for a student who would like to be a compensation specialist like you? What should this person do?
Well, the only reason I laughed is because, like I said, no little girl lies awake at night going, gosh, I hope I'm a compensation analyst. And I was not myself. I did not do that. I think that the thing you'd want to do, if you determine that this is a good field, what you would do is you'd want to join World at Work. And that's an international group. It's based in the US, but it's, I think they take that world very seriously.
Okay.
And so they're considered the governing body over the discipline. And I would join them.
They're specifically on compensation factors.
It's actually they call it total rewards, which is kind of the new buzzword in terms of, that's a bad word to use. It's an umbrella over all the different things about compensation and benefits together. They're frequently grouped. When you see, at least in the US, when you see an opening for a director level position in my field, it's not uncommon to see a director of compensation and benefits, somebody who's going to lead all the benefits administration, the selection of benefits, which is an incredibly complicated process and very expensive, as you can imagine. And because, of course, in the US, that's our vehicle for health insurance and things like that. So it's a huge part of why or what you're going to look for in an employer. And so then they generally have compensation specialists, and then they have benefits specialists underneath them running all of these programs that we're talking about. So total rewards is what World at Work covers, and that's compensation, that's benefits. They talk about work-life balance, which here is basically begging people to take vacation and really take vacation and not work during their vacation. And also, do you have enough time to have a life on top of your job? It's a growing field. It covers executive compensation. So this whole umbrella. So World at Work, that's what they specialize in. And they have people who sit around, well, that's a bad term to use. They are thought leaders in each of these areas, and then they look for content, they produce content. And so if you're interested, then you can call them and they'll get somebody to run a seminar about work-life balance or compensation. They certify in all of those different fields. If you want to be in the other compensation, then you would get the one with job descriptions and salary ranges, et cetera. Then you're looking for what they call a CCP, a Certified Compensation Professional, which is a pretty rigorous event. You're taking 10 very in-depth courses and taking very in-depth tests for each of them and then you have to maintain that certification. I'm a certified sales compensation professional, which was a deep dive on that, plus a deep test and then an obligation to continue it. So if I were somebody who wanted to get into this field, I'd join World at Work. I'd start pursuing certification because it's a great way to learn the information. And then what you're doing, if you do this for a living, you're tying yourself to working for a large company, which has great advantages. Small companies generally don't have someone like me they rent people like me. And then, so you're either working for a large company or you're working as a consultant. Through your career.
And what background, as in, like, for example, your major or your specific skills should a person have? More math skills, psychology, economics?
One of the best analysts I ever met, she was an actuary in her previous life.
Okay.
I had started out as a generalist. I really backed into being a comp analyst. I needed a job that was in Phoenix. Okay, I was commuting a great distance for that generalist job I was talking about, and what I needed was a job in Phoenix, and there was an opening for an entry-level compensation analyst who had a degree in human resources management, which I actually had. It was a new thing back when I graduated from college, and I was a business management major at Arizona State University, with an emphasis in human resources management, and that's all they required. And I had a year of experience working in HR, and I realized I really enjoyed that a lot. I would not have considered myself a math person so much. I actually had more of a writing thing going on, but again, I'm really dating myself hard here, but when I started in HR, nobody had a computer on their desk. So
Computers
I
are
was
recent, right?
pre-computers. Oh, well, my boss actually arranged for me to get a computer. It was on a rolling stand, so it could go anywhere, and it had a little dot matrix printer underneath it. And because I said, look, I could run some of these things you want me to do better with a spreadsheet. I knew that. I'd done a little bit of spreadsheet work in college. They had like a little IT, business applications kind of class,
Was it
and they
Excel
taught you how to
already?
have. No, it was Lotus 123.
Okay.
Excel didn't exist when I started. I'm a dinosaur. And I can hear my son. He's probably in the hallway going, tell us more, Grandma. So I taught myself how to do things like keep track of vacation balances on a spreadsheet, where we
Uh-huh.
constantly keep updating as you put in your request, that kind of thing. Instead of doing it in a ledger, one page for every employee. When I
Yeah.
started, everybody had you had binders everywhere. Here's my vacation binder, and here's my, benefits enrollment binder. And I convinced my boss, well, I could do some of this better if I used a spreadsheet. I knew enough because I really liked accounting.
Mhm.
That's very helpful. And I knew that a ledger approach would work, and a spreadsheet's just a giant ledger.
Mhm.
And then I just took it from there. So the affinity for the systems is very, very helpful. That is the thing. Now,
Mhm.
you need to be able to navigate not just the like Microsoft Office products. One thing that has helped me a lot in my career is that I would never call myself an expert, but I'm more conversant in Microsoft Access
Mhm.
or database application than any of my peers.
Okay.
And I taught myself that to run things, and it's really, really helpful. Of course, Microsoft Access didn't support it anymore, and I don't think they even sell it anymore, which is really heartbreaking. But it's huge to have that kind of mindset.
Yeah.
Another thing that's big are the enterprise applications. You probably, if you have a company or a sales force that is of any size at all, you want to think about using an enterprise application to run the commissions program, because it's extremely complex to do that kind of thing by hand.
Mhm.
And that's probably one of the biggest achievements of my career, is the implementation of one of those programs for the company I work for now. There's a whole discipline around that. And then the other thing that one of the things you had asked me in prep for this conversation is, what am I curious about now? And what I'm getting ready to do next month is sit for my PMP,
Mhm.
professional project manager,
Yeah.
because that's really helpful. And I really enjoy it. Ticks all my boxes of, having something neat and set, and it fills itself in as you learn more, and it keeps everything scheduled. And it's I've been waiting for that my entire life, just to do that. So
Wow, fantastic. I can see you have built skill sets in the very different ranges of abilities, right? Because, for example, you said you had the experience of implementing enterprise systems, which require, and I can imagine that having the database background helped you with implementing these systems, because you could talk with IT people much easier than it would be if you
yes,
didn't have this type of background, and making the
yes.
reports and going through all the process and how it's going to work. Because just a quick story. I had a very bad experience implementing an enterprise system in the company I worked for, because we simply left it for the IT people. Oh, look, you guys are gonna
Oh
take care of
no.
this and go
Ooh,
go
yeah.
implement the system. And there was no person in HR, for example, with a project management background that would go through the whole process of putting the
Right,
system on the ways that it should be for an HR person.
right.
So we learned it the hard way, and seeing what you're saying right now, um, it's very helpful for any. I think it's a lesson for anyone here that you should have the minimal background in the database systems, IT, project management, maybe even some statistics or. Um,
Oh yeah, that'd be very, very helpful.
And I meant to ask you when I jumped to another topic, the actuarial person. It surprised me because actuarial science is actually very much deeper on the quantitative side than I would imagine you would need for an HR or compensation specialist. Is there actually very complex themes to work on as a compensation analyst?
Yes, the analysis can be huge, and you're frequently wrestling with massive data sets. For example, if I need to think about, a what if on commissions, if we did something as simple as change it by a percentage. Okay, essentially, I'm looking at maybe 15 million lines for a year, possibly.
Wow.
And so that's huge. Just getting started with that. That's where you want to use a database because Excel isn't going to be able to handle it. And and then complex analysis, that is, it's good to be able to wrestle the numbers. And the actuary, she was wonderful at, and actually taught me many things that I did not know about Excel and all that. The place where she learned, I think, was about having the insight about how people behave under different circumstances. And if we change the commission rate 1%, what effect is that going to have, not just on numbers, but on people? I think, so you want to be, just strictly being a numbers person, I think, isn't going to give you a full experience here. Some of the best things I feel I do is working with our senior sales leaders about what's in their toolbox and what can I do to help you, and thinking about what would make sense under these circumstances. They have a question, and I kind of reach into a toolbox and I pull out a wrench, I pull out a hammer, and you've got these things that we could go with, and that's really rewarding. So you need to have a good mix of both.
Yeah, and now that you say, I can think about in a Fortune 500 company which has many types of data and people and different and a rich history. You could probably answer things like, well, there was this one time where people tried to have like a team bonus, and I thought it was going to go well, but it didn't go well. And you can show it in the data how this might have affected the compensation or the turnover rate, or I don't know what, and get all those huge data to make more in-depth analysis, right?
Yeah, analytics is a huge field right now, and so you'd want to, I think, you want to be experienced in that as well.
Yeah.
So.
Great, Elizabeth. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you think was interesting for us to talk about?
Let's see here. I made a list. You asked about what do I wish I'd known when I started out. And it's interesting because I had a full boat career, a full boat education from Arizona State, and graduated with honors, but I had no idea how an office ran. And this is soft knowledge that you don't think about. You take a business communication class, but they don't talk about, and one thing I've learned, if I could talk to, 30 or younger Elizabeth, I would say, if you have bad news to deliver, don't ever put it in writing. Okay, at least not, you break that verbally so you can manage the response. You can, when the person flips out, you can talk them down off the roof. And because I think, as you know, and I know, you send an email saying, well, the results weren't what you were expecting. And you send that in an email, and so it gets forwarded to Lord knows who else. It comes back to bite you. So you want to call that person and say, here are the results, and let me answer any questions you have right now. So that kind of thing. Stuff like that. That's a kind of soft knowledge. And I think a lot of people are lacking it. I don't think it gets covered. I think you'd need a fairly intensive internship in a program to even start with that.
Yeah, some things we learn it the hard way, and it's the best way to learn is actually doing things in the job. But it would cut a lot of corners if there was some orientation on that type of thing.
Yes.
So that's a
Yeah.
very good point.
Yeah. And one of the things, you were talking about compensation analysis as a field. It's interesting. Like I said, nobody dreams of doing this, but it wound up being just absolutely the perfect thing for me. I have a very, I don't know if you've ever heard of a personality type called a scanner.
I never heard about the scanner, but
I think Burke is one.
Okay.
We'll just drop his name right now.
Okay.
Burke, I believe Burke is. Think of somebody who starts a lot of things. They're interested by everything. Okay. And they don't always finish everything. And I don't know that Burke doesn't finish things, but Burke is infinitely entertained by everything. There's nothing that is not interesting to Burke. And
just a note to the listeners, Burke was our first interviewee.
Oh,
so
okay.
if you want to look it up, it's our first interview. It's Burke Files.
There you go. And in my application, it's probably like, one stop short of a good ADHD diagnosis. Think of a bee going from flower to flower, very interested, but keep moving. And when you work in compensation analysis, you can work in any industry. Okay, I have worked in healthcare, airlines, manufacturing. I have consulted across all of them. All right. And so there's nothing, you're not dependent on any economic situation. If you're in oil and gas, maybe that's a terrible thing right now, and you might be stuck if that's the only place you can work. But in compensation, like HR, you could work almost anywhere. You really get to understand how a company works when you're writing their position descriptions, when you're managing the salary ranges, when you're writing incentive plans. You are learning everything about the company. So I've been able to do things like climb up into an airplane that's going through its annual C-check, where they strip it down to the component parts. And what was interesting about that, I hadn't even thought about this, but what's really fascinating about that is that my very first job out of college was working for a manufacturing plant that made structural material for planes, among other things. It's a honeycomb product, and that when they make it is very, very strong, very, very light. Right. And when you take a plane down to its component parts, you see the honeycomb. Like when you walk down the aisle on the plane, there is honeycomb that's making the floor that you're walking on with metal on either side of it, like a sandwich of like honeycomb. Yeah. When they take paper or metal or any other kind of composite product and they turn it into this honeycomb, it's really, really light, obviously valuable in a plane, and it's really, really strong. And so when I was working for the airline, they said, hey, well, I was over at the hangar for doing what I do. And they said, well, we're doing a C-check. Do you want to, it's required by the FAA. Do you want to see? And of course I want to see. And so I climb up in the plane and I'm walking around and I see all this honeycomb exposed. And they said, oh my gosh, when was this plane built? And they said, oh, 1986. And I said, I can almost guarantee you I hired the people who put that stuff together.
Amazing.
You don't get a lot of task identification in human resources. You don't get a lot of finished products, but that was a thing. I had never had that connection before. You get to give presentations, a lot of training. Okay. When you're in sales compensation, I spent a lot of time orienting people to how our systems work and how the plans work, et cetera. And I really enjoy that. You get to run big projects. I have implemented 2 large enterprise applications in my career. And that's a task identification. It's a very, very interesting field. And
awesome.
So
did you run a lot of interviews? Selection processes, interviewing people to be hired?
When I was working as a generalist, yes. And so what happened, try to make this more concise, but so I got out of school and I took a traditional HR generalist entry level job, and again needed a job that was in Phoenix, and so I didn't have this hour-long commute both each way to go to work. And so I start that job, and I get into compensation analysis, and I work at that for about 10 years or so. And then what happened is my youngest child, he developed asthma and he couldn't go to daycare anymore. And the only solution here is, I guess I'm going to quit my job and be a stay-at-home mom. And a coworker said, you should meet, well, it's a woman named Kathleen Duffy, who's just a marvelous person. And she had, at the time, what was considered very, very strange and interesting, a virtual model of recruiting. Okay. And so everybody worked at home. And so I could do that and have my child at home. And so I started recruiting. And one of the questions you asked me is, what have I ever failed at? And I'll tell you right now, I am a much better analyst than I am a recruiter. An analyst is kind of like an engineer. And if I call you and I say, hey, Edson, you interested in this job? And you say, no, I'm like, okay, thanks. That's great. And I go on, right? And that's making my people training me to do this. That's not what you do. I'm supposed to say, well, what would make you be interested, or do you know anybody who's interested? And you got to work.
Of course.
Yeah, I wasn't really good at that. But what they did do is they said, you're a compensation analyst, and a lot of our customers need compensation analysis too. And so that's how my consulting practice was born, with a company called Duffy Group here in Phoenix. And they are here in Phoenix, but they work across the country at very least. I'm not sure if they're international. And they'll either find candidates for you, or they'll do complete recruiting for you. And so I started doing compensation analysis on this consulting basis, and that was life-changing. This is one thing I really want to share that I hope you don't edit out, is that when you work in a corporate job, the way I had for so many years, especially in compensation analysis, you kind of get this none shall pass attitude. You're a gatekeeper. You're stopping people from doing crazy things. Like, no, you can't offer this person $100 more an hour over the maximum. You have to stay within the boundaries, that kind of thing. You can't just make up a position on your own. And you consider yourself you're there to keep the rules. It's easy to get into that mindset. Well, when you are trying to do this for a customer and you're the consultant, you can't have that attitude. You're working for a customer and you want them to succeed and you want them to do it sensibly. All those rules I'm talking about are there for a reason. And they're good rules, but you don't do that with someone you're consulting with. You say, well, you'd be more successful if you did it this way, within these boundaries. And it really changes your mindset. Working for Duffy Group and being a consultant was transformative. That is, and I think one of the things, if I've had any success at all in sales compensation, it's because, and so what happened is the economy downturned and I needed a regular job. And one of the companies I was consulting with, they needed a compensation analyst. And so I started working for them full time. And you're my customer. You're a captive audience of mine. You can't decide to, take your business elsewhere, but I still am treating you like a customer. And I have found that it's a wonderful thing when you treat a salesperson as if they're your customer. They really engage with that. I think everybody likes that. They like knowing, that you're going to treat them like they're a customer and not an interruption or a hindrance or that consulting thing was huge for me and really changed my outlook on things.
So if I were to summarize what you just said is in a work setting or in general, whenever you're relating to people professionally, you should always treat them as a customer.
Always.
If you're a colleague, your boss, or anybody, just treat them as a customer, and
customers. And
you're gonna have a much better relationship with them.
And that's one thing I've learned. Salespeople are wonderful people. They're optimistic and they're always excited or pretending to be. And at least they do a incredible job with that. Everybody is your customer. I think that is, your spouse is your customer. They could take their business elsewhere. Your grown children don't have to hang out with you if they don't want to. Everyone is a customer.
Yes.
And when you look at it that way, then you think about, well, why can I make it worth their while to be with me? and to do things with me. How am I helping them? And that was life-changing.
Awesome. I think it's a great closing remark for our podcast. And Elizabeth, it was a pleasure having you here today. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, thank you. Pleasure being here.
Thanks for listening to Profit Talks. Now, do you have any comments or other business-related question? If so, please send us, and we'll be glad to explore it in future episodes. Also, be sure to subscribe and share with your friends. We are on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and many others.